Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. We like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. On this episode, we're chatting with Keryn from the Kulhaus Cabin located in Lake Tahoe, California. We cover a lot of things, from AI taking over the world to the design inspiration behind her Aframe, to the disadvantages of running a cabin as a woman. So stay tuned to find out what else we cover in this episode. Thanks for joining us. Let's do it.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi.
You look so official with your headset on.
Well, it's so funny. I was just like struggling over here because my son, I stole his gaming setup, which he didn't appreciate, but then I kind of figured it out. So I'm using my nerdy work headphones. So
Well, it's working great.
Okay,
you
great.
are doing it.
Awesome. Okay. Nice to meet
you.
guys.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, just to clarify, do we say it Keryn?
It's Keryn, just like Keryn,
Okay.
but not Karen with an E.
But not like that.
Yeah, not that Karen.
Thank God your name is spelled different.
Oh, thank goodness. I know that was good foresight on my parents' part.
Yes. Yeah, I like
Thinking
it.
way ahead all the memes. That's good.
Yeah, at least 30, 40 years of it. Yeah.
They were looking way in advance. Good for them. I feel
Mhm.
bad for all the other Karens. I love starting with job titles, and I love that the job title can be whatever you want it to be. And you went to great places with yours. So you introduced yourself as a business owner, change agent, and undercover geek. Can you tell us a
Yes.
little bit about specifically the second two, but also the business owner piece?
Awesome. Am I allowed to have three? Why not? Right? You said
You're allowed to have as many as you want.
Okay. So, business owner, it took me a long time to actually accept that title. And once you start doing rental management or home ownership, short-term rental ownership, you kind of feel it's like a little foe, not like a real business, because you're just kind of learning the ropes as you go. So I'm trying to like take ownership of that now. So I'm embracing it. I'm holding
Yes.
it up on my name card. So
I feel like this is also a female specific thing, because even in
totally.
I'm a business owner in my full-time job too. And I called it like my project for like almost a year or more until someone was like, listen, this is a business and you need to like start taking it seriously.
Yeah.
And I realized how many other women do that too.
I'm totally guilty of it. And it's, a little bit of imposter syndrome because, I wasn't like bequeathed this title. Like someone didn't give it to me from like an upper management place,
Yeah.
except for in my head. And so I didn't think it was legitimate until I'm like, oh, I can actually call myself such. And it is so.
Yes.
So, yeah. So that's where I had to put that first, because I do want to do like what you guys are doing. It's like scale and really to, make this like a bigger thing than could have ever imagined. The change agent and undercover geek, that was also something that you don't always, again, being a woman and being in the design industry. I come from, apparel design and the fashion industry. Calling yourself a geek is not okay. It's not fabulous. So I have always been a little bit of my brother was a science fiction geek growing up. We watched creature features on Saturday mornings. I was kind of always a tomboy, not ever really girly. And so I'm a bit of a conundrum, I guess,
Yeah.
paradox wrapped up
Yeah.
in Keryn. So I like to call myself undercover because I don't like to be overt about anything. You can't label this. So, being a little stealth about what I know is like kind of my secret weapon. And
I like that.
the industry that I'm in now, I used to be a full-time apparel designer, like a fashion designer. I used to design clothes. And now my career has really taken a huge pivot into technology for the design industry. So, that art science thing is real in terms of how I always approached everything. It's just there's pure art and then there's like actually putting logic against that. And
Yep.
that's kind of what I like to do. So I think having those three titles is today. That's what I like.
Yeah. What about change agent? Like what kind of change?
I was just describing like the business, the work that I do, my professional day job, jobby job.
Jobby job.
Jobby job, the job. I should take it more seriously. This whole cabin thing has
That a lot.
completely messed me up because now like the cabin stuff is what I take more seriously than my day job.
Mhm.
It just takes over, right? But
Yep.
so in my industry, it's like architecture, people used to design with their hands and like sketch and draw. Our industry did that for a long time, and
Yeah.
we really haven't really adopted new technologies or things ways of working. So I'm introducing 3D design and using 3D software and tools to get people to model clothing, with gravity and physics and all of that. So that's a huge paradigm shift for our industry, where people still like to watercolor paint, or they use, Adobe Illustrator to draw flat sketches. What we do is not flat. So, now we have the technology, we have bionic technology that we can
Yeah.
build better things. So that's the change agent work that I'm doing, is like bringing people along on that journey, that digital transformation.
So this makes sense because you're the first website for a cabin that I've ever seen with a 3D tour on it.
Really? It's
Yeah.
like, it's so funny.
I've seen it in real estate, like listings.
Yeah.
And
Matt,
that seems because I think it's expensive. You can tell me more about this. My impression is that it's expensive to do that. In real estate, you're making a ton of money off of a sale, right? So it's worth it. You see that ROI almost immediately if it sells the house.
right.
But
Mhm.
I haven't ever seen it in cabins where it usually is more individuals. And this is our personal investment and our personal finances.
That's right.
And I don't think the ROI is necessarily as evident if pictures and a regular video can do, but it was really cool to see on your website.
Oh, thanks. It's not that expensive.
Really?
Yeah, I think that as long as you keep it under, I'm like totally, gonna bust this out now. If you keep it under like 3 properties, you can do it for like the minimum amount of cost of entry.
Okay,
Minimal.
so you didn't do it yourself. Someone else
I
did it
did.
for you. You
No,
did
I
it.
did. Okay, so this is, like once you become like a DIY freak, you're like, you just become cheap about everything. You're
Yep.
like, I can do it myself.
Yeah.
So I literally, okay, so YouTube everything, YouTube
Yep.
University has taught me everything in
Yep.
life. And so you go around with like a mop or a broom, and that's your tripod. and and then you go around and you like basically just do the matrix turn.
So what camera were you using?
My iPhone.
What?
And it was an iPhone 9 at the time, so it wasn't even a
How did
good
you
one.
how did you attach the phone to the mop? Was it duct tape or was that more sophisticated? than that?
No, it's super, super like cave woman. I was like just holding it with my hand and like doing it was a little acrobatic because you do have to kind of like spread your legs and like do like a little kung fu to
I
get
hope you
that.
had someone else recording you while you were recording your space.
I
That would
wish
be awesome to see.
Oh my gosh, I wish I did. I'm up there so much by myself. I wish I did have people documenting, because they would really see what kind of a freak I am.
That would have been an amazing reel to see the behind the scenes of that. I can't believe we're like 5 minutes into this call, and that's one of the best pieces of advice that we've gotten.
Yes, totally. Go and do it. It's like the price of entry is nothing. And it's
Okay, I'm gonna
I
YouTube
agree.
it and try it.
I agree. It's totally impactful. And, you can do a walkthrough, you can do the whole 360. And it's just, I think, and that's before AI takes over, I think we should all be doing at least this,
Literally my biggest fear. We have this conversation. We literally had the conversation on Friday, whether climate change or AI is going to be what takes us down. And I'm
One or the
firmly
other.
team robot. I think that's going to be what does it.
It's the
First.
machine, the rise
Yeah.
of the machine. This is like
I'm
all
pro,
those.
pro AI.
I know. I love AI. So far, I've only tampered with it, tinkered with. That was a slip. But all those years of science fiction watching with my brother, I'm like, oh my God, it's happening.
So do
It is
you also
coming.
do you nerd out on Chat GPT as well?
Yeah, it's not quite there yet. I feel like it's still, they
It's
can't,
pretty impressive.
it's
That
pretty
thing is
impressive.
insane.
But,
What have you used it for, Justin?
Some people at work use it for some coding stuff, and then me and Sean at
Copy.
work will just mess around and ask it ridiculous questions and work through problems, and it comes up with some pretty good solutions, even like business plans and strategies. It's
I
like
tried
really
strategy too. I was like, wow, they actually know what I do. And they
Yeah,
can
and then you
strategy about it.
and it's like a chat bot. So then you just keep saying like, oh, that's not good enough. Can you make it more creative? And I'll be like, okay, yep. And then I'll make it more creative and more, like the things. that comes
Justin,
up
you
with
are
is
training the robots that are going to
You
take
are.
us over.
Just don't teach them how to extinct the human race, and,
Yeah.
and then we're good.
I think as long as you can just, I don't know, hopefully maybe worst case I can fall back and just be a laborer for some robots or something. AI will
Okay,
come
so
in.
someone, when we had this conversation on Friday, we actually came to a good place, which was like, what if robots develop feelings and then they take over, but they take over in a good way? And they're like, humans, you're fucking this up. We're going to fix
Right.
it for you. And I was like, I have never considered this, but this
How
would
to
be like
be
best case.
But I think
totally.
I think the problem with that is as soon as they say, "Hey, humans, you're fucking this up. You're the weakest link. Goodbye," and
And they're going to take us out.
Yeah.
Or will they be compassionate and really help us reform ourselves?
Janice, you have such a kind soul. I love.
I know.
I'm just wondering, you could go.
I think, Janice, you need to be more on these AI programs so that they can learn from you.
Yeah,
They learn bad things from me because I have a dark side.
yeah. Same with me and Sean. So yeah, Janice, if you can get you and everyone else on
Yeah.
that'd be great. We need some.
I'll work on my bravery and overcoming my fears and do it. Okay, we've definitely gone in a different direction than Kevin. Okay, so Keryn, I don't actually know much of the history of your cabin aside from what I learned in your pre-interview. So if you can start from the beginning for us and for anyone who doesn't know, because right now you own one cabin, where that started, was there like a moment where you're like, this is something I need to do? And was that when you found the cabin, or how did that process start?
What did they call it? Is it my origination story? Is
Yeah.
it how I became an evil villain? So it's funny. My first STR experience was in 2008, and this was before Airbnb. So there was no platform, and I was living in Portland, Oregon, and I decided to rent my 3,000 square foot house out to somebody. I was going to move to Oregon to be with my partner, or Bend, Oregon. And so I tried to find a listing site that would allow me to list my property. And the only thing that was available at that time was called corporate housing by owner. And I think VRBO may have actually existed at that time too, but I ended up wanting corporate housing by owner because I wanted like more than a night or two stay.
Yeah.
And okay, super high, like this is the wild, wild west. There was no credit card transaction, no rules or regulations, no taxes.
Any reviews or anything?
Nothing. It was just like list it and see, let's see how it goes. And so I got this family from Saudi Arabia who was like a family of 6. And the guy wanted to bring his family over to go to school for the summer because he had that experience growing up. And they stayed for 3 months. And I was operating from, Bend, Oregon, and they paid me in cash because in $100 bills. Almost
Did they
no,
leave it
no, it was almost $10,000 in $100 bills in a Louis Vuitton briefcase.
Did you get to keep the briefcase?
No, I was like, yeah, can you just leave that here? Because I was too afraid to touch it all. And we had to literally count the money in front of him, like
to make sure that it was the right amount. Yeah, that makes sense.
So we're paying like groceries for like a year with $100 bills, like a couple hundred bills to go to Costco.
Okay, but I can see how this would sell you if you're like operating in hundreds.
This is amazing. Yeah. So that was my first hosting experience, but I did learn a lot I realized that I didn't want to deal with the general public after that again because it was really hard. Like, what it's like to host, right? There's like, they don't know how to operate the TV, and like, how do I'm in like 300 miles away. I can't help you with this. So fast forward, I moved back to the Bay Area, and I was a single mother. It was so expensive. I made no money off of that house in Portland. And when I tried to buy a house in the Bay Area, it was just priced out. It was like, I don't have $1 million plus.
Crazy market.
It's so stupid. And so I was renting, like I still pay $3,000 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment. I rent here. And so, yeah, I know people are going to freak out. So, which is the reality of everybody who lives here. And so the things that I loved about the Pacific Northwest was that, the pine trees, and like, it reminded me of my childhood, that when we used to go camping in Tahoe. We didn't have a lot of money. All my friends were going like to Hawaii on vacations, and my family went camping. And so my childhood memories is that pine smell, just like the air.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, well, let's just take a drive up to Tahoe because I was missing Oregon. And I'm always on the hunt for a cool house. And I went up to see an A-frame, and it was kind of not awesome. And then I just spent the weekend there looking around somewhere, and I found this one. I'm like, this is it. When you know.
Yeah. How did you know though?
It was not in, there was a couple of factors. One, I knew that the STR restrictions were coming in that area. So I went outside of that area. So I knew what my boundary was, like the boundary line was, and this was in that neighborhood that was not going to be impacted. And then it was cheap. It was like $345 in 2018. So this is pre-pandemic. So things are still fairly affordable. It had been sitting on the market for like 3 months because back then, it wasn't trendy. So this was a quirky, inconvenient type of house to live in. So the locals weren't interested in it. Nobody was really looking in that market for a cabin. And so it was just kind of this diamond in the rough. And I think, as a designer, you can kind of see past. All you see are bones. You don't see all the bad decisions of the existing owner.
That's a unique skill though. I feel like that's your design background, because that was one of the questions I was going to ask, is like, so few people have the vision where they can walk into a space that needs to be renovated.
Yes. And you can see it.
Yeah.
Yes. It's like X-ray vision, right? You're just like, people get hung up on the tile work and stuff. I'm like, nope.
That's right. Because you have to be able to not only see what could be, but also erase what's currently there.
That's right.
So it really is. X-ray vision is such a good way to describe it, where you're like, the skin that would normally be on the outside, you're just not even seeing it.
Nope. I see the bones and I see potential. And once you own one house and you understand what renovations entail, I go through every room like $3,000, $2,000, $1,000. I can do that myself, so you just kind of
feels like the show on HGTV and the little price tags at the bottom keep popping up, and then grand total at the bottom. And
like there's some I'm sure you guys, when you look at properties and you're like, oh my gosh, I have agita, I can't even, this is too overwhelming for me because it's so bad. That's
structural versus decor is a hard line for me. And bringing the structural, this is like the biggest mistake, I think. And I made this mistake on my first short-term rental. I did not bring a structural engineer in. And because it was so expensive, I had such a tight budget, and I was like, ooh, like another like $1,500 for something. I was like, no, I can't do it. And then sure enough, one of our giant retaining walls had to be replaced within the first 2 years. And that was $65,000.
Yeah. Those are the big ticket things.
That 1,500 is sounding really good right now compared to this 65,000.
Seriously, like living in the Pacific Northwest, you know what water damage looks like, right? And so that's always like one of the first things I look is like the drip lines along the ceilings. If I see any water damage, I'm out. Like that's done. Next,
that's big repairs. Same with structural. They're like big renovations. It's not fun renovations. It's like really expensive renovations that leave it looking exactly the same as it was.
Right. Before. And that's what, when I saw this cabin for the first time, it was mostly, I could see it was really well cared for and high quality materials in the roofing. So I was just like, okay, this is going to be mostly a cosmetic job. I'm like, so fun. Like that you get gratification out of that. You don't get gratification of like new foundation and plumbing. Like that's such a drag. But yeah, I was just like, okay, it's on. This is it. On.
Okay, what role did the tree play? For those who don't know, and you need to look her up on Instagram and follow, but there is this giant tree like right in front of the cabin, and it's so notable and distinctive and unique.
Oh, Janice, I'm so glad you mentioned that. That's because this has been like a bone for everybody who wants to cut that damn tree down. And I'm like, back off, and trust me, I went through all the whole journey of like what to do with this thing. And his name is Jeffrey because he's a Jeffrey pine. He's our spirit tree. I touch him every time I come in now because I'm like, I feel like he's there he's been there before the cabin was. So I'm like, he has more right to be there than I do, or this house does. So I thank him and I do the tree hugger thing. And I'm like showing my gratitude for whatever his purpose is. One of the ideas was, I'm going to make this cool modern totem and like shugi bonnet and like, char it. It's going to be super like dope, like, structural modern thing. And of course, my friend's like, so you basically want to kill the tree and burn its corpse and have it in front of your house.
We're like, I can't do that to Jeffrey.
On a vanity project. I'm like, okay, I guess that's not going to happen. And then I'm like, well, maybe I can like make some furniture out of it and, repurpose it. And we can have a nice pine dining table or something. And apparently Jeffrey pine is too soft. So I couldn't do that. I actually talked to, like, I'm a little woo-woo. So I talked to a tarot reader and she's just like, yeah, I can't read any energy coming off of this tree. So I just don't know. Like, yeah, that's kind of the sensation I get too. He's just kind of neutral. Yes. So I feel like
he gets to stay.
He gets to stay. There's no reason I'm not mad at him. So
it makes me really like the original builder of the cabin, because when we were building Cozy Rock, there were 2 big beech trees and I really wanted to save them. But my builder was like, well, you should, this is dangerous. If you leave them up, they could fall in the cabin. And I was like, okay, I hear you. And I really want to keep them. So I feel like whoever built the cabin had to make that same choice. And it's so close to the cabin that
so close. Yeah. And does your deck go around it? Or, I love it when people build around.
I know, I do too. Your tree, Jeffrey, is closer to your cabin than the 2 beech trees, who I am now going to name. Thank you for that.
You have to.
Great stint. Yep. So I didn't have to make any decisions about building around them, but I did have to make the decision to leave them there. So I feel like whoever built your cabin really had a choice, and it really is like part of the build.
I think so.
That's like unique to like the older cabins too, because I feel like now with like new builds, a lot of like
they just flatten it.
Yeah, they'll want to clear it out because you got to get trucks in there. If you got to drill a well, you got to get a foundation poured, and like there's so much. Like they'll try to clear out as much as they can, but I feel like back then there was way less rules, and they just kind of did it live. But it's super unique to these older cabins. It's super cool.
My son actually said like that. The thing that called it for real was that he's like, but Mom, it's iconic. And I was like, geez, 11-year-old. Like, what you know,
that's exactly what it is.
And after he said that, I'm like, well, I guess that's it. I can't cut the iconic tree.
That is a great description. That's exactly how I feel about it, and why I feel very drawn to it whenever I see pictures of your cabin.
It's so centered, isn't it weird? It's like it photobombs the cabin. And we've had artists render the cabin because I love commissioning artists to express their work this way. And a couple of them want to just remove the tree out of the composition. And I feel like something's always missing. It's like,
you can't.
You can't. Yeah, it just doesn't feel right.
No, I love it. So when thinking about your X-ray vision, what was the inspiration for the design behind the cabin? Because the interior is just beautiful. You've obviously put a lot of work into it. I actually couldn't find any before pictures. I'd be so curious to see what it looked like before, but were you inspired by something in particular with the interior design?
Oh gosh, I'll say that working in the design industry for 25, 30 years, you kind of don't ever get to fully express your creativity. And because you're always under whatever constraints of the brand. And I felt like this was my one opportunity to be like purely expressive of my own personal taste. So, but I was also kind of anal retentive about it. So I wanted a very pure palette, and I was very disciplined about that palette. So, before, I feel like the matte black hardware is like everywhere now, but back then everybody in Tahoe thought I was bizarro for putting that in there, because Tahoe's it was very traditional and conservative at the time. Everything was like bears and plaids and very log cabin-y stuff.
Yes, my first cabin looked exactly like that.
Yeah. But if you ever looked into my actual like personal clothing closet, everything is black. So it's like a sea of black, and everybody who knows me knows that I murder everything out. Everything's black on black on black with some Japanese natural woods and things like this. But I don't use a lot of color in my personal life. I mean, I think I have a little bit color in my pillows there, but it's pretty neutral palette. So I think that there was a little bit of my New York all black, like very all black. Then there's my Portland life, where I brought in a lot of like more the natural materials and concrete, and love the Portland aesthetic so much.
Yes.
It's like that graphic and organic mix. It just works really, really well.
Yeah.
And then I always wanted to put like something a little edgy and modern and like modern design in there. So, I have a little bit of my personal art collection in there. Friends that are like all the art pieces in there are personal friends of mine, like from my Nike days and my other parts of my life. So I just kind of like to mix it up a little bit. And I think was it Levi Kelly was like saying that it's very easy for things to look very magnolia and like homogenous, and everybody's kind of doing the same thing. I kind of hope that my style will evolve, and hopefully that'll reflect in the cabin. This isn't like the end of this cabin aesthetic. My cabin's probably going to go through a few changes every 5 years, because that's just, I get bored. I'm already bored.
But I like that. I like that idea that it, especially as a designer, and in your jobby job, you are driven by client work, but this is your creative outlet. So the fact that you could get to redo it or parts of it over time, I think is part of what makes it fun.
Totally. I need that. If I don't have that flexibility, like I did do IKEA cabinets in the kitchen on purpose, because I knew that I could switch out the cabinet doors whenever I wanted to. So there's going to be a point, I'm already future proofing this place. I'm like, there's going to be a time where I'm like, I'm so over the matte black, and I'm just going to turn it on its head and do something completely different. And it could be very easily done. I kind of
Okay, that's very smart though. Very strategic that you thought about. And IKEA cabinets, we tried to do IKEA cabinets and couldn't get the ones we wanted in time. But it also is a good budget in terms of like cutting in some places.
It sure is.
I think there's a couple of companies that do like the refacing of those cabinets.
Yes.
What's it called? Simply Made? No, is it Simply
something like that?
Semi-made.
That's what it is.
Yeah. My girlfriend. Semi-handmade. My girlfriend just put that in her kitchen, and they're awesome. Oh my God.
In my head, I'm like, what's the catch here? Because I'm like, it seems pretty like a sweet idea with getting the base cabinets and they're swapping the doors and the hardware. I mean, good idea. It makes sense.
That's what we were supposed to do. And they discontinued the green color like right before I ordered, which then led to the paint debacle of our cabinets. So I'm a little bit mad at them.
Yeah.
But I'll get over it eventually. Okay. So one thing I love about cabin culture is that, and you mentioned this, right? That like what inspired you to do this was camping as a kid and that smell and like connecting the outside world and nature with the inside. But I do think that for women, this can be a really tricky space where venturing into nature, whether it's hiking or doing other things by yourself, can be scarier than it is for men. What has that experience been like for you, especially as a single mom working on a cabin in the woods? Like, what is your relationship with nature?
This is such a deep, deep topic for me. Like, I am a single mother. I'm a solo parent, so I don't have like weeks off. This is my full-time job with him. And he's 11 now. But when I first got the cabin, he was like a wee little thing. And I grew up camping. I grew up, my family taking us on van trips or in a tent, like an army surplus tent, or, we'd go and hike and find a place to just set up camp. And we talked about this a lot when I worked for the North Face, is like women just don't have that luxury to do it on their own. Like there's certainly badass women who go out there and just like, whatever, I can take care of myself. I'll take on any bear out there because I've got, I'm equipped. But, I'm 5'2". I can't take on a bear. And it's oftentimes not the bears that I'm afraid of, right?
I was just going to say, that's not what I'm afraid of.
Yes. So it's real. Like, I think that we don't talk about it enough. And so, I've traveled the world by myself, like ever since like right out of college. I just went all through Europe on a train on my own before cell phones. I've traveled all over Southeast Asia and Europe on my own. And so I'm very sensitive to like personal safety. And, I went to school at Berkeley and I lived next to Oakland. And so there's like, lived in New York. So I'm very savvy around personal safety and kind of becoming invisible when I need to. But in the outdoors, you would assume that you'd be safe because it's not an urban environment. But, even at a cabin, like I can't take my son camping. I just don't feel safe. But I'll, go to auto camp and have that glamping experience because I can lock the door. But the cabin was like my alternative to that. Like Aframe is a tent shape and it do get that like escape and like that experience of being like roughing it a little bit. But the most important thing for me is like, if I'm going to take my son anywhere, I just need to feel safe.
Yeah.
And I just need to have that sense of security. So our cabin actually is in a neighborhood. It's not like out in some people think it's like out in the middle of nowhere. Like you guys are remote, but we are.
I'm in a neighborhood too.
Are you? Okay.
I'm on
gosh, see, I get the impression that it's like you're like on your own when you're out there.
No, there's isolation when you're at the cabin, but it's not far from town and there are other houses around. So
okay, that's good. Like that gives me like I'm really close with my neighbors next door. They live there full time. So I always know if they can hear me scream if I need them. But it never gets to that point because this neighborhood's really safe. I mean, do you guys have this problem with bears on the East Coast? Like where you are? Okay, we have.
What kind of bears do you have though? Because we have black bears in Boone that we deal with. They're like so innocent. They're just there for food. And if they hear you, they like disappear. Are you dealing with grizzlies?
No. We have the same. We have California black bears. They're just hungry and kind of do.
Exactly.
They're looking for
one on our front porch, and that's exactly how I would describe. He was giant. It was last spring. He was coming out from hibernation, but he just went like this, and then he sniffed around, looked for stuff, and then just disappeared.
Yeah. When I'm at the cabin by myself, I actually sleep upstairs on the loft because I'm like, no bear's going to go up that spiral staircase.
That's right. Bear proof.
Yeah. But, like, especially cabin culture lifestyle, you always see like a husband and a wife. And, there's always like a man around who is outside with an axe and doing all the heavy lifting. And, I don't have that luxury. So feeling safe and having a sense of security, I feel like I love to invite like single women to the cabin to stay because like everybody wants that experience to escape their urban life. Or whatever they're trying to run from. And, I want this to be a safe, like respite, something that they can like lay their head down and
rest easy.
And rest.
Still be in nature and connected to nature.
Yeah, right. And go to brunch.
Go to brunch and have mimosas. Yeah. So this is interesting because I have not thought about that piece as much as I've thought about cabin ownership as a single family or as a single woman. Because Sean and I are married now, but my first cabin I owned alone for 3 or 4 years, and that in rural North Carolina. Wow. I say that because that experience of dealing with electricians and plumbers and calling for propane and being asked, may I speak to your husband? And I'm like, there is no husband. Well, let me speak to the owner of the cabin. Okay, well, you're speaking to the owner of the cabin. Have you ever experienced any difficulties or sexism just as being a single woman owning the cabin and just like through the operations of it?
Oh gosh, like all my life. I feel like this is just another theme of that. But yes, like exactly what you have to invite contractors into the home. And I've had to pretend, and I learned this when I owned my house in Portland, you have to pretend you're married. So even when I rented the house out to that family for the first time and they arrived, he didn't want to conduct business with me. He wanted to conduct business with my husband. So I had to pretend that my friend was my husband, and he conducted the money transaction while I showed the wife where the washing machine was. So for sure, there's still that mentality, even in our culture. We have the contractors looking for like, well, where's your man? Who can like lift this this wood pile out of the truck. And I'm like, you're looking at him, like
Yeah, that's right.
that would be me.
And I will
So
do it. Thank you very
yes,
much.
right. And, I could definitely like flip my hair and, be cute and have them do it for me, but I'm just not hardwired like that. So
Yeah.
I'll take it on. But I've been very fortunate, at least in Tahoe, where I've made really good friends who are very helpful and, understand that I'm kind of doing this on my own. So they're always there to lend a hand. And I had a handyman who was, oh, he was so freaking incredible. His name is Ryan. Lost Coast Retreats, I think is his business on Instagram, but he helped me put together the cabin in those early days. I was in the Bay Area. He was living up there, and he and I just had like a really mind reading type of like working relationship where I said I wanted like this kind of cabinet and this type of thing. And he would just like get it done within a day. And he didn't quite always understand what I wanted, but he trusted me. And I think that that's the kind of relationship and experience that you need as a woman. You just need to be able
Yes.
to trust the people that you're working with.
Well, and for him to trust you feels so huge because the
Yeah.
amount of times that I worked with someone, a contractor, and would tell them what I wanted and then had them tell me what I needed. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
no, no,
No.
I've done my research. This is what I want. You don't know. And then they just tell you and like that
Oh,
conversation.
silly woman.
Mhm.
Like, oh dear woman, you just
For the
don't.
record, that's across the board. That's men and women. Everyone
They'll do
gets
that to you too.
it. You get it all the time. Yeah, it's essentially like whatever's the easiest for them and the quickest, and they'll try to convince you that your little design idea is cute, but it's not practical and it's going to cost too much. And that's every contractor
That's
ever, for the
true.
most part.
Yeah.
I,
I mean, I don't have experience in that situation as a man. So to me, it very much feels in a lot of those cases that the reason that it was happening was because I was a woman and I
mhm.
looked young and was young
Oh, yeah.
relatively for
Yeah,
a homeowner when I bought it. I'm like 29 and so they're just like, you obviously don't know what you're doing.
You're so naive.
Yeah. And then would proceed to like potentially flirt or be inappropriate in your house. So
Yeah.
then as a woman trained to be really nice and a people pleaser who also needs this one contractor who is hard to find to do the thing they said they're going to do you kick them out of your house or do you just put up with it until the work is done and then
Yes.
be
And
grateful that it's over?
it's hard to find good help, like across the board, right, Justin?
Right.
It's hard to find consistent people who show up,
Yep.
people who do quality work. And then, yeah, when they add that layer of jerkiness, it's a little
Yeah. And
just,
so many cabins are in rural areas. That's the appeal of it, right? That
Mhm.
that adds on to the lack of options. So you really get stuck. My electrician came once and talked to me about Trump, like debated with me about Trump for an hour. And I should have just let it go, but I really struggle with that when it comes to Trump and didn't. So I engaged in it. And it's an hour later. And then I got charged for that time.
Oh,
And I
no.
called them and wanted to
Oh,
complain about it. But I had to be very polite because it's the only electrician I could ever
yeah.
get to call me back. And I was like, I know I'm going to need them again. I have to be very
Yeah,
delicate.
it's true. Just like working with the local population too, you just have to be really sensitive to where you are too.
Right.
So like you can be like, I'm from the Bay Area and I'm super bitchy and I just know what I want, but that just won't fly up there. So you
Yeah.
just have to kind of like respect goes both ways. But yeah, we have similar dynamic in Tahoe. It's a different part of California that nobody really knows about.
Yeah. I am very grateful for Freeport because, first of all, my cousin built the cabin and every contractor he's connected me with has been nothing but amazing. So that has been a very eye-opening and positive experience to help
Mhm.
offset my experiences in the rural mountains of North Carolina that I love deeply. It's just
Yes,
culturally very different.
totally.
Yeah. Okay, so back to design of your cabin. You mentioned that you care about how it looks, which is obvious by looking at your pictures, but that it's also really important how the space takes care of the people who are staying there. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and maybe give us some examples for those of us who might not be thinking about it in the same way?
Yeah, like, you know, it was Steve Jobs, I think. I mean, his thing was like it's something good design is not how it looks, it's how it works.
Yeah.
And so there's interior decorating and then there's interior design. And I think that that's what I try to keep reminding myself is like design isn't just oh, just put some fluffy pillows down. Like I want someone to be able to like go in there and go, oh wow, she thought about putting like extra charging stations here because
Mhm.
she knows that I happen to be working here too. So I spent a lot of time there just kind of understanding the space and understanding what annoys me about an A-frame, like you can knock yourself out on those rafters, if you're not careful. Like it it can really ring your bell, like because it's so low and you don't expect like the ceiling to hit you in the head. So I've had to actually lay it out so that you don't run into things. And that's tricky. And designing and laying furniture around an A-frame is really hard because there's no vertical wall. We have two vertical walls,
Yeah.
but the rest of it is at a very severe angle. And so, space planning is really hard. Like I've had to build like flip out desks to afford someone to be able to work upstairs on the loft so that it can stow away because you just don't have you have floor space, but it's not usable vertical space. And
I had
so,
never thought about this. I don't think I've ever
yeah,
stayed in an A-frame before, which is crazy to reflect on.
yeah, it's challenging. Like we have no storage, so everything is like using like small, like precious amount of space for a lot of things. So in the main room, there's an 11-foot dining table. And I think originally there was like an L-shaped island that came off of the kitchen, and I felt like it cut the space in half. So I had that removed, and then I had this table fabricated by a local metalsmith, and it just kind of allowed more usable space because I think if you don't use that space, then you have all this like if you put like a dining table and then there's like a foyer area that what do you use that for? So
Right. Dead
you
space.
really dead space, right? And it's only 1,000 square feet. So every square foot is like precious. And so just orienting things so that it feels like you're not going to slam your head against anything. That's always been the challenge. But it has to feel open, it has to feel intentional, it has to feel warm, it has to feel like you're not constantly hitting your legs up against furniture. And I've had to swap furniture pieces in and out just because it just didn't work with the flow or it just didn't wasn't usable. So everything has to be usable.
Yeah. This is
They
so interesting because when I read that, I thought taking care of you was going to be like nice little features or things that you put in there, not taking care of your physical body, like protecting heads and things like that.
Yeah. And like, that it does kind of bleed into like during the pandemic, I got really OCD or like, like germophobia.
Mhm.
And so there's like a $1,200 HEPA filter in there to like hospital grade HEPA filter. I was putting like copper sheets on everything and trying to like fit like problem solve. Like if anybody came here, would they feel like this was sanitary
Yep.
enough without being sanitary? You don't
Yeah.
want it to smell like bleach and sterile. So how do you afford them that sense of sanitation and cleanliness without them even knowing that that's happening? It has to be in like still be a beautiful
Right.
experience.
That was such an unexpected time because I think this might have happened to you as well, but our entire area shut down rentals for 2 months, which makes sense. They didn't want anyone coming in and bringing COVID in. But that was the biggest reality check I've ever had about like, oh, we rely on this income. What happens now? So when rentals
Yeah,
were allowed back, that became such a priority of like, I will do anything and everything to make sure that people feel safe here
that's right.
because
That's
it was
right.
such a necessity.
It was. And I'm icky too. Like if I go to a place, like I still travel. I put the like towels on the pillows because I like people drool and I just don't feel like that's what I want to rest my head on. So, I was really particular about making sure all the pillows were lined properly and we had protectors on everything so that any ickiness that I might have perceived for anything, I kind of over compensated for it at the cabin.
Justin, you were going to ask something, I think, when we were talking about design of the space.
Yeah, I was just curious when you first purchase it and you're designing, did you always design, with the guests in mind, or did you think this was going to be a place for you and then later on you changed it to hosting? Because I know keeping that in mind kind of, I guess, changes maybe some design decisions you may make.
For
Now
sure.
that the house needs to like speak for itself when you're not there to like talk to your guests in person.
Yeah. No, I'll full transparency. I expected to, I planned to rent it out. So from that experience in Portland, I really did enjoy the idea of hosting. I always wanted to love creating spaces. I thought it was just, that's what I wanted to do. So it's always intentionally been a short-term rental proposition. So, there were items that I brought in from my personal furniture, like my vintage pieces. At first, I was like, geez, do I really want to put my precious vintage Scandinavian furniture in here? But then I was just like, well, I want to enjoy it too. Like, I would feel kind of like this isn't an awesome space because everything's from Amazon. So I kind of had to make those decisions of like, I want it to feel real. I wanted it to feel like it came from someone's home and heart, and that there was a soul embedded into some of these pieces. Other things are like intentionally built for short-term rentals. Like we have stemless wine glasses. We have a very
Smart.
industrial strength like espresso machine, so there are things that can't be precious because it just gets jacked up too quickly. But there are things that, it's still my home. I want to go there and go, wow, this is so awesome. It just feels like real. It doesn't feel like manufactured.
And I feel like that's such a tough balance. Even with people we spoke to before, it's just like designing for both, wanting to be this really unique, gorgeous space, almost like it was your own home. But then
Mhm.
at the same time, you're thinking of like all the traffic that's going to go through there. If it's, sleep
Yeah.
6 people, you're going to have 6 people in here drinking and eating dinner all at the same time. Like, how hard are they going to be slamming the cabinets? And like,
Oh,
where are they
yeah.
going to look when they're looking for another wine glass? It's like you're thinking about all this stuff, and it gets tough.
So true. Like the rug in the main room is a ruggable because I knew like there's for sure I wanted to like a flocati rug or something that was more luxurious. I'm like, people kick off their shoes and it's bare feet. I'm like, so I wash that thing all the time because I just feel like it's a rental, and I want it to be clean. And so I just want to wash it a lot.
But I feel like you can do both, and that's the beauty of Airbnb or short-term rentals is that we don't want the hotel experience where everything is mass produced and it might be beautiful, but every single room in the hotel looks the same, right? If
Mhm.
you're choosing a short-term rental over a hotel, you are looking for a human's perspective on that
Yeah.
place, that space. You want those unique pieces. So just figuring out which ones need to be rugged and which ones
Yeah. Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
really express yourself, I think it's worth the time. And it sounds like you've really done that really intentionally.
Yeah, thanks. The personality part is really important. Like otherwise, yeah, it's just so generic.
Yeah.
I feel like you could almost make an argument for, or at least I made a lot of arguments for spending more money on like maybe more expensive brands or things, or like get something made by like a local wood shop. Cause then, although it's more expensive and maybe you think like, oh, I don't want to put that in there, it's expensive, I wouldn't want anyone to ruin it. But chances are it's maybe better built and it
Yep.
can stand
Yeah.
up to things more versus if
Yeah.
you buy something on Wayfair for $50,
Oh
it's
my
going to break in
gosh.
6 months. But if you buy a nice piece from Rejuvenation, it might last 6 years. So
That's right.
I mean,
Yeah.
you could definitely make the argument, at least to
Yeah.
yourself if you're trying to rationalize spending more money.
Well, that table, the main room conference table,
Yeah, you
it's
said
like
that's metal, right?
huge. It's all metal fabricated, a powder coat. It's so beautiful. Like we designed it together in a local bar together while we were
I
like,
love this.
I know. And literally it was like back of a napkin situation. And I'm like, I hear the measurements for the microwave oven because I don't want it to be on the countertops. I want it to be underneath and I want this drawer to be hidden there. And we kind of just sketched it out. And then next thing you know, he's like with the helmet on, putting it together in this like amazing metal shop in Tahoe. And I was just like, God, this is so freaking cool. And so he did the metal vanity in the bathroom as well. And I just like, God, I just need more projects and supporting like you hit it on the head for me, Justin. It's like supporting the local economy was such a learning experience for me because I had originally had like Home Depot flooring put in and it was the worst freaking experience of my life. Like I was like, it was nuclear. It was so bad. And then I was just like, screw it, I'm never going to go big box with this place. And I just had made so many friends with the local hardware store people and like the local retail people that I'm like, okay, so now the kitchen counters are from a local source. All the bathroom was all done by a local tile person. And I just feel like that's like the symbiotic relationship that this cabin now has with the community. It's like they know I'm here to support them. So they've been so good to me. Like I just do everything that I can to promote those local businesses because they're trying just as hard to stay alive in this industry and in this economy. That mutual support has been amazing.
I think that piece is often missed when communities are having a conversation about short-term rentals and whether or not they should ban them and regulate them. I'm a big fan of regulations personally. I'm not a big fan of banning them. And I think that's missed that when done well and right, in my opinion, which is very subjective, there is a symbiotic relationship and it isn't just take, like I'm just
Yeah.
greedy and I'm trying to make all this money off of my house. There's also a lot of give. I'm
Yes.
curious how you and Justin, I'm curious how you all think about this too. Like, what are some things that you integrate aside from sourcing products in the house? What
Mhm.
are some ways that you integrate the local economy and that your cabin like kind of gives back consistently to them?
So I started to do merchandise to sell in the cabin that I either made myself or I partnered with local people to just promote their business also just because it was during the pandemic and I just needed something to do.
Yeah.
And so we have like these water bottles, with our logo was lasered on the tops, and portion of that went to Keep Tahoe Blue. So any of the sales I would donate to them. I mean, during the Caldor fire, I was just donating to everybody to help everyone because that was just so traumatic. But I either partner with locals. So like we have a local massage therapist who can do in-cabin massages.
Mm.
We have a local chef who does in-cabin private chef dinners. We do like forest bathing, like, just the local shops all have like some amazing service that's very unique to that area that I just want to bring that to the cabin. Like that's part of the experience is like,
Yeah.
it's just so authentic and connected. So, or it's on Instagram. It's like whenever people are posting stuff, I'll just like repost
Yeah.
their post because it's just like I love them. Like there's so
Right.
many
And it gets them
like,
in front of a bigger audience
yeah,
potentially. I don't know how many followers they have versus you, but even if it's just a new audience, right? It's like
totally.
still it can't hurt.
Totally. Like some of my so the first group of friends I ever made in Tahoe was the local coffee shop. The coolest people. I know, I'm like, these are my people. They were called Black Cabin Coffee too. So it was just
I
like
love it.
we were spirit animals from the beginning. But it's just like we sold their coffee in our cabin for a while. It was just collaboration, collaboration, collaboration.
Yeah.
Totally. It's so awesome. So good.
Yeah, that's what we've done with our gift bags. It's all from local folks. Like there's a woman run salt company that I love, and we put like a little
Mm,
container of salt there because we're like right on the ocean. So that's not our cabin is not, but our town is.
that's perfect.
And just things like that. But we also added a page to our guest book for souvenirs. So it's like, okay, who wants to spend their time souvenir shopping? At least I don't. But at least I always want something to remember different trips by. So we're like, okay, here's 2 pages of local items that we love, the QR code. You can order it online, have it wait for you at home, not have to actually go out and go shopping,
So
but
amazing. Ooh,
still support local businesses.
love that idea. I might steal
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, you totally should. Everybody should. I feel like it's a great way to get them
Yeah,
shopping at local businesses either. And they can also go in person, right? Like you can look up the QR code and pop in person, but I just personally don't always want to go shopping. I'd rather be doing something else. So then you can still
totally.
support them.
Like hanging
And
out at LL Bean or something like that. Not Janice, don't even try
that
to
is,
bring
and that's
that
what
up.
I do.
Yeah.
For fun, we hang out at Bean. So you're right, Justin. Thank you. That is exactly what we do. Oh man. Okay, Justin, what do you all do at the Chalet Frame?
I mean, not like pretty much the same thing. Like we have like these little like artisanal marshmallows that we give out for our
Mm,
guests too. And then our guest book, we're pretty much just pumping the tires of all the local companies, like
yeah.
pretty much breweries and coffee shops and restaurants. And our first place was a brewery kind of down the road. Same thing. Owners are awesome. Place is cool. And everyone that comes to our place, we just say, hey, first thing you should do is go get a chicken sandwich down at Snow Republic and grab a beer, and it's awesome. So things like that.
It is really helpful, I think, when you're suggesting local places to suggest an individual item on the menu. Cause I do, again, I feel like that's why people want to go to short-term rentals versus a hotel. A hotel is always going to tell you what some, nearby restaurants are, but like a short-term rental host is going to be like, if you want, a lobster roll, go to this place. Thank you, Justin, for pointing us to Jameson. If you want good hoppy beer, go to this brewery, right? But like, the specific items that you might want to get at each place. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The nuances. That's right. Like all the details of it, or like this bartender is really great, so make sure you ask for them, or whatever it might be. That's like the beauty of hosts who are invested in the community.
Yeah. Yeah. That
I really
personal touch is so important. Like that is the experience, like there's the cabin, but then there's everything around it. Like
that's right.
And it has to complement each other.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because that's when I became connected to your cabin. I think I had followed it already. I'm sure I had, and it was beautiful. But when the wildfires were happening out there, I remember becoming so emotionally invested in your cabin and you as a human, because I'm not sure I knew the human behind the cabin until that incident happened. Mm-hmm. But I remember going on Instagram intentionally every day to look at your Insta story because I wanted to know like what was happening. Is everything okay? And what's happening? How did that tighten your relationship with the community there?
Oh, Janice, that makes me emotional. Thank you so much for that. It was truly traumatic. I don't think it's like the looming threat of a natural disaster like that, where you just feel so helpless and out of control.
You were far away.
So far away. And then just the collective trauma that it caused, and not being able to do anything. So the community was suffering. I felt like a bit of an outsider because I was so far away, but I was still invested. So I wanted to do everything I could to support the local community. So like whatever charity that was happening, I was just like, please help me, let me help you. But I can say that the Instagram thing was so therapeutic for me as well. Just being able to report out because people were so concerned was really helpful for me because I was going through so much pain. So Boho Aframe, do you follow her?
I don't know. I'll have to look that up. I don't know the human.
Okay, she's amazing because she had reached out and she said, hey, my husband is there. He's a firefighter and I will have him drive by your neighborhood and make sure it's okay. And I was like, I'm like, I was just so overwhelmed by the kindness. Like she didn't have to do that. And like the fact that her husband was like fighting this horrible fire was just like too much for me to like comprehend. So, she's so reassuring because she's a first responder herself. So she kind of understands the shock and trauma people undergo. But that was like, there's the local community and everything that was going on there, but there was also the Instagram cabin community that also rallied around what was happening. And that was so beautiful. And it was just like, I don't think I could have gotten through it in the same way if it wasn't for people like you and, just people just kind of being concerned. I'm so grateful for that.
That's what's unique and special about the cabin community, because I feel like so many of us live in our own like silos, where amongst my friends, I think the only one, or one of very few who own a cabin and understand that draw and appeal. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes when you're having conversations over beers in your regular lifey life, if you will, not everyone understands. And then you go on Instagram and suddenly the people that you're looking at and following and talking to have that same feeling. And so to go through something like that, of course, like anyone who has that same connection to their own cabin can't watch that and not think about how horrible that would be.
Horrible. Yeah. It's the collective like support. It truly is an amazing thing. And I'm so grateful for the cabin. I call them like cabin tribe, because it just feels like that. Sometimes it does take special people. Like it's amazing. I feel like I'm cut from the same cloth as like you guys and like everybody else who owns a cabin, because they're so creative, so ambitious, so like smart about business and like branding and like being on brand and like creating those experiences. Like we're all kind of similar in that way. And I feel like I've come home in a lot of ways. Like this is feeling so much more authentically me than like fashion, the fashion industry. So yeah, I'm so it's been more than just a cabin for sure.
Oh, Keryn, it was so great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here and sharing all about your cabin. Tell folks where they can find you.
We are called Kulhaus Cabin, Kulhaus, and we are on Airbnb. You can look at us on www.kulhaustahoe.com.
And that's where you can see the cool 3D. What is it? 3D, right?
Yeah, the 3D tour.
Yeah, the 3D tour.
Interactive tour.
Yeah. Awesome.
Definitely do it. I highly recommend.
Yeah, we'll keep you posted when we do that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, so thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. And if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts of the podcast over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can always find us on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and The Chalet Frame, spelled the CHALA frame. Looking forward to next week.